Admiral Zexthul stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, watching the blue marble grow larger with each passing moment. Earth, the third planet from a yellow star, home to the species that called themselves humans. His 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he studied the tactical displays. Surrounding him, the hegemony fleet stretched across space like a dark cloud of death. 300 warships, each one capable of reducing a city to ash in minutes. Behind them came the troop carriers holding millions of Zexthul's finest soldiers. This was not just an invasion force. This was extinction made manifest. Admiral, his second-in-command, Captain Mordan, approached with measured steps. The captain's scales rippled with nervous energy, something Zexthul found amusing. Our scouts report the humans have detected our approach. They're moving their primitive vessels into defensive positions. Zexthul's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. Primitive vessels. Show me these defenses that dare challenge the might of the hegemony. The main screen shifted to display the human fleet gathering near their moon. Zexthul counted perhaps 200 ships of various sizes. Some were clearly military vessels, bristling with what appeared to be kinetic weapons and crude missile systems. Others looked hastily converted from civilian purposes, probably cargo haulers and passenger ships pressed into service. They're so small, Mordan observed. Our dreadnoughts outmass their largest ship by a factor of 10. And yet they gather to fight us, Zexthul mused. Either they are incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Perhaps both. He turned to his communications officer. Have you completed the translation matrix for their languages? Yes, Admiral. We intercepted thousands of their transmissions during our approach. Their primary language appears to be something they call English, though they speak hundreds of different tongues across their world. Excellent. Open a channel to their fleet. Let us speak to these humans before we destroy them. I am curious about what drives them to such futile resistance. The communications officer worked quickly, his clawed hands dancing across the control panels. Within moments, he nodded to the Admiral. Channel open, sir. We're broadcasting to their entire fleet. Zexthul straightened to his full height, an impressive sight even by hegemony standards. His species had conquered 17 worlds before adding Earth to their target list. Each world had fallen within days, sometimes hours. He expected nothing different here. Humans of Earth, his voice boomed across the void, translated instantly into their crude language. I am Admiral Zexthul of the Hegemony Fleet. You are faced with a force beyond your comprehension. 300 warships, millions of soldiers, weapons that can crack your planet's crust. Your resistance is meaningless. Static filled the channel for several moments before a voice responded. It was rough, weathered, clearly belonging to an older human male. This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We receive your message, alien. We have one of our own for you. Zexthul's eyes narrowed. The human's tone held no fear, no pleading, just cold determination. Speak, human, but know that nothing you say will change your fate. We know who you are, Admiral Chen replied. We've been watching your expansion across this sector for years. We know about Kepler 442b. We know about Proxima Centauri b. We know about all 17 worlds you've conquered. This gave Zexthul pause. The humans had been monitoring their campaigns? How? Their technology appeared centuries behind hegemony standards. Chen continued. We know your tactics. Land overwhelming force, break resistance quickly, enslave or eliminate the population. It worked on those other worlds because they were unprepared. They thought like you do. They thought in terms of honor and conventional warfare. And you do not? Zexthul asked, genuinely curious now. No, we don't. The transmission carried an edge that made several bridge officers unconsciously step back. You see, Admiral, you've made a critical error. You've studied our technology, our military capabilities, our numbers, but you haven't studied us. You don't understand what humans really are? Enlighten me, Zexthul said, his amusement returning. Tell me what makes humanity so special that you think you can stand against the hegemony. The pause was longer this time. When Chen spoke again, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Yet every word carried across the void with crystal clarity. We are the species that looked at our own world and decided it wasn't dangerous enough. We took fire from lightning and claimed it as our own. We stared into the abyss of space and called it our destiny. We split the atom and harnessed the power of stars. But most importantly, Admiral, We are the species that has spent our entire existence perfecting one single art form. Which is? War. The channel fell silent. Zexathul felt a strange sensation in his chest, something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest. It took him a moment to recognize it as unease. You see? Chen's voice came back stronger now. Every other species you've conquered achieved peace among themselves before reaching space. They forgot how to fight because they didn't need to anymore. But humans? We never stopped. We never had peace. We fought with sticks and stones, then bronze and iron, then gunpowder and steel, then nuclear fire and beyond. War isn't just what we do, Admiral. War is what we are. Zexthul's tactical displays began flashing warnings. The human fleet was moving, not in formation, but in seemingly chaotic patterns. Ships broke away from the main group, some diving toward Earth's atmosphere, others accelerating on intercept courses with his fleet. Your ships are scattering, Zexthul observed. Already abandoning the fight? Chen's laugh was cold. Scattering? No, Admiral. We're just getting started. You wanted to see what makes humans special? Watch closely. Class is now in session and today's lesson is why. In 4 billion years of evolution on Earth, we're the only species that survived by becoming apex predators. The transmission cut. Zexthul stared at the screen as human vessels accelerated to impossible speeds, far beyond what their technology should have allowed. His sensor operators called out contact reports as more human ships appeared from behind asteroids, from lunar orbit, from positions they shouldn't have been able to reach undetected. How many ships do they actually have? Morden whispered. Before anyone could answer, the first wave of human fighters reached weapons range, and Zexthul learned that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The first human fighter craft struck Zexthul's outer perimeter like meteors made of fury and steel. What should have been a simple matter of point defense systems eliminating primitive attackers instead became a nightmare of impossible maneuvers and devastating firepower. Report. Zexthul barked as his flagship shuddered under impacts that should never have reached them. Sir, the human fighters are. They're not following any recognizable attack pattern, his tactical officer stammered, all 4 of his hands moving frantically across the control surfaces. They're using our own weapons against us somehow, and their acceleration rates are off the charts. On the main display, Zexthul watched in growing disbelief as human fighters performed maneuvers that should have turned their pilots into paste. They dove straight into concentrated fire zones, twisted through impossible angles, and somehow emerged intact to deliver devastating strikes against ships 10 times their size. How are they surviving those turns? Morden demanded. Our computers calculate they should be experiencing over 40 times their gravity acceleration. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the human fighters, badly damaged and venting atmosphere, transmitted on an open channel. The voice was young, female, and completely steady, despite the fact that her ship was dying around her. This is Lieutenant Sarah Martinez to any hegemony forces listening. You want to know how we're pulling these maneuvers? Simple. We don't fight fair, and we don't fight to survive. We fight to win. Her fighter suddenly changed course, diving directly toward the nearest hegemony destroyer. Zexthul realized with horror that she wasn't trying to escape. She was making a suicide run. Stop her, he ordered, but it was too late. The human fighter struck the destroyer's engine core at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The resulting explosion took out not just the destroyer, but 2 other vessels caught in the blast radius. One fighter just destroyed 3 of our ships, Morden said in a voice barely above a whisper. But that was only the beginning. As the human fighter waves continued their assault, Zexthul began to understand the true horror of what they faced. The humans weren't just willing to die for their cause. They were eager to die if it meant taking enemies with them. Admiral, his communications officer called out. We're receiving thousands of transmissions from the planet's surface. You should hear this. Put it through. The bridge filled with a cacophony of human voices speaking in dozens of different languages, but all saying essentially the same thing. His translation computers worked overtime to process them all. This is Moscow Defense Command. All civilian evacuation complete, beginning scorched earth protocols. Tokyo reporting. Fusion reactors going critical on command. Area denial in effect. London here. Orbital defense platforms online. Give them hell, people. New York calling all ships. The missiles are flying. God help us all. Zexthul felt his blood run cold. They're destroying their own planet. No, sir. the tactical officer said, studying the readings more carefully. They're not destroying it. They're weaponizing it. Every major population center is now a potential bomb. Every orbital facility is a gun. They've turned their entire world into a weapon. The main display shifted to show Earth's surface. Brilliant flashes of light erupted across the night side of the planet as humans launched everything they had, not just from military installations, but from civilian launch sites, from mobile platforms, even from what appeared to be modified spacecraft landing pads. Sir, I'm reading over 10,000 missile launches in the last 60 seconds. The sensor operator reported. Make that 20,000. 30,000. Sir, they just don't stop launching. Zexthul watched the swarm of human weapons accelerating toward his fleet. Each individual missile was primitive compared to hegemony technology, but there were so many of them that they created their own tactical environment. His point defense systems, designed to handle perhaps hundreds of incoming threats, were faced with tens of thousands. How is this possible? Mordan demanded. Our intelligence said they had maybe a few hundred nuclear weapons. They lied, Zexthul realized. Or more accurately, we counted their strategic weapons and assumed that was all they had. We didn't count their industrial capacity. As if to prove his point, more flashes appeared on Earth's surface. But these weren't weapons launches. These were factories exploding as humans converted entire manufacturing facilities into massive bombs rather than let them fall into enemy hands. Admiral, the communications officer said urgently, priority transmission from the Hegemony Council. Not now, Zexthul snapped. But the transmission came through anyway. Admiral Zexthul, the voice of High Counselor Vexmore filled the bridge. We are monitoring your engagement. Why have you not achieved orbital dominance? Your reports indicated this would be a routine conquest. Zexthul glanced at his tactical display. In the 20 minutes since combat began, he had lost 47 ships to an enemy that should have been swept aside in minutes. High Counselor, the humans are not fighting as expected. They appear to have hidden their true capabilities. Explain. Before Zexthul could respond, alarms began blaring across his bridge. A new contact had appeared on sensors. Something massive accelerating up from Earth's gravity well. What is that? He demanded. It appears to be a space elevator, sir. But they've detached it from the planetary surface and are using it as a kinetic weapon. Mass approximately 50 million tons. Impact velocity. Admiral, if that thing hits us, it will go straight through the flagship. Zexthul stared at the impossible sight. The humans had turned a piece of civilian infrastructure into a planet-killer weapon and launched it at his fleet. Evasive maneuvers. All ships scatter, but the human assault was just beginning. As his fleet struggled to avoid the massive kinetic projectile, more human forces revealed themselves. What had appeared to be asteroids suddenly lit up with engine signatures as hidden bases activated. What had seemed like empty space erupted with weapons fire as cloaked human vessels dropped their stealth systems. High Counselor, Zexthul said into the communication channel. I need to call you back. Admiral, you will explain this delay immediately. Zexthul watched another of his destroyers die as human fighters swarmed over it like angry insects. Each fighter was tiny compared to his ships, but there were hundreds of them, and they fought with a coordination that spoke of years of preparation. High Counselor, he said slowly, the humans knew we were coming. They've been planning for this invasion for years, maybe decades. Every piece of their technology, every defensive position, every strategy has been designed specifically to counter our standard tactics. Impossible. Our intelligence network is perfect. Then your intelligence network told you what the humans wanted you to know. The transmission from the council cut off abruptly. Zexthul suspected he would be court-martialed if he survived this engagement. At the moment, survival was looking increasingly unlikely. Admiral, Mordan said quietly, perhaps we should consider withdrawal. Zexthul looked at his tactical display again. His 300-ship fleet had been reduced to 230 in less than an hour of combat. The humans showed no signs of slowing their assault, and new contacts were appearing on sensors every few minutes as more hidden forces revealed themselves. No, he said finally. The hegemony does not retreat. Signal the fleet. All ships maximum offensive. If these humans want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. What he didn't yet understand was that forgetting was not something humans did well, and in making this a war of extermination, he had just guaranteed that humanity would never ever forget the hegemony. The human counterattack began 3 hours after Zexthul had ordered maximum offensive. What he witnessed next would haunt him for the rest of his considerably shortened life. It started subtly. Small human craft that had been disabled in the fighting suddenly came back online, drifting closer to hegemony vessels under the pretense of being debris. When they reached optimal range, they exploded with enough force to cripple ships 50 times their size. "They're using their own dead as weapons," the tactical officer reported, his voice strained. "Every destroyed human craft we've detected is rigged with some kind of delayed detonation system." Zexthul felt his stomach turn. The hegemony had rules of war, protocols that governed how civilized species conducted themselves in battle. The humans appeared to have thrown such concepts into the nearest star. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. It's Admiral Chen again. Put him through." Chen's voice crackled across the bridge, but now there was something different about it. Where before there had been determination, now there was something that sounded disturbingly like amusement. "Admiral Zexthul, how are you enjoying your introduction to human warfare?" "You fight without honor," Zexthul replied. "Using your dead as weapons, turning civilian infrastructure into bombs. This is not how civilized beings conduct war." "Civilized?" Chen laughed, and the sound made several bridge officers flinch. "Admiral, you came here to commit genocide. You brought 300 ships to exterminate our entire species. And you're lecturing us about civilization?" "We offered you the chance to surrender." "No, you offered us the chance to die quietly. There's a difference." The tactical display lit up with new contacts, hundreds of them emerging from Earth's moon. Zexthul had scanned the lunar surface repeatedly and found nothing but old human mining operations and research stations. "What are those?" Morden demanded. The answer came as the new contacts resolved on their screens. They were indeed mining and research stations, but the humans had converted them into mobile weapons platforms. Massive railguns that had once been ore extractors now hurled projectiles the size of small buildings. Scientific instruments designed to study space had been converted into sensor arrays that painted targets for missile swarms. They militarized their entire lunar infrastructure, Zexthul realized. In the time it took us to cross their system, they turned every civilian installation into a weapon. But the real horror came when the human ground forces revealed themselves. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're being hailed by someone on Earth's surface. Audio only, encrypted military channel. Put it through." The voice that came through was different from Admiral Chen's. Younger, harder, with an accent Zexthul couldn't identify. "Hegemony Fleet. This is General Harrison, United Earth Ground Forces. I thought you should know what you're really facing before this goes any further." "We know exactly what we're facing," Zexthul replied. "A primitive species with delusions of grandeur." "Is that so?" "Let me paint you a picture, Admiral. Earth has 8 billion humans. Each one of us has spent our entire existence preparing for war. Not intentionally, mind you. It's just what we do." Images began appearing on Zexthul's secondary displays transmitted directly from Earth's surface. Cities burning, but not from hegemony weapons. The humans were destroying their own infrastructure to deny it to invaders. Every human child learns strategy through games. Every human adult works in industries that can be converted to weapons production within days. Every human settlement is a potential fortress. The images shifted to show massive underground complexes, clearly built over decades. Tunnel networks that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Manufacturing facilities buried so deep they might survive direct orbital bombardment. "We've been fighting wars for thousands of years, Admiral. Against ourselves, against our environment, against every challenge this universe has thrown at us. We don't just have armies. Our entire species is an army." More images flashed across the screen. Children, some appearing to be barely teenagers, operating sophisticated weapon systems. Elderly humans manning defensive positions with the calm efficiency of lifelong soldiers. Civilians working in bomb factories with the dedication of religious zealots. "But here's what should really concern you," Harrison continued. "Everything you've seen so far? The space battles, the kamikaze attacks, the converted civilian infrastructure. That's just us being polite." "Polite?" Zexthul couldn't keep the disbelief out of his voice. "We're still playing by rules, Admiral. Geneva Conventions, laws of war, basic human decency. We're still trying to minimize civilian casualties and preserve infrastructure. We're still pretending this is a conventional military engagement." The transmission paused, and when Harrison spoke again, his voice had dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than any scream. But if you continue this assault, if you force us to abandon those rules, you'll discover why every other species on Earth went extinct. And we didn't. The channel closed. Zexthul stood in silence for several minutes processing what he had heard. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to coordinate their defense against wave after wave of human attacks. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Admiral," Morden said quietly, "perhaps we should consider the humans' words. This is unlike any warfare we've encountered." "They're bluffing," Zexthul said, but his conviction was wavering. No species could maintain this level of aggression indefinitely. As if summoned by his words, alerts began screaming across the bridge. The sensor operator's voice cracked as he delivered his report. "Sir, massive energy signatures emerging from Earth's polar regions. It looks like they're activating some kind of planetary defense system." The main display shifted to show Earth's magnetic field lines lighting up like a vast electrical grid. The humans had somehow weaponized their planet's own magnetic field, turning it into a massive railgun that could launch projectiles at relativistic speeds. "Impossible," Mordan breathed. "Target lock detected," the tactical officer called out. "They're aiming at the flagship." Zexthul watched in fascination as the humans prepared to fire their planet like a gun. The sheer audacity of it was beyond anything in hegemony military doctrine. They had turned their entire world into a weapon, and they were aiming it directly at him. "All ships, emergency scatter pattern 7, he ordered. "Maximum evasive." The planetary railgun fired. The projectile that emerged from Earth's magnetic field was roughly the size of a hegemony fighter craft, but it was moving at nearly 10% the speed of light. When it passed through the space where his flagship had been moments before, the gravitational effects alone were enough to damage nearby vessels. They missed intentionally, Zexthul realized with growing horror. That was a warning shot. His communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission from Earth. This time it wasn't military. The voice belonged to a human child, probably no more than 10 years old by his species standards. "Hello, alien people. My name is Emma. I'm 8 years old. My daddy is fighting you in space and my mommy is working in the bomb factory. I wanted you to know that even us kids are ready to fight if you come to our planet." The transmission included a video feed. The child was standing in what appeared to be a school classroom, but instead of normal educational materials, the walls were covered with tactical maps and weapons diagrams. Other children could be seen in the background, some working on what appeared to be explosive devices, others studying star charts and fleet movements. "We learned about you in history class," Emma continued with the casual tone children use when discussing their favorite games. "You like to make other people into slaves. But we don't want to be slaves. So we're going to fight you until either you go away or everyone on Earth is dead." She paused, seeming to consider something. "My teacher says you probably don't understand humans very well. She says you think we're like other animals you fought. But we're not. We're predators, and Earth is our hunting ground, and you just became the prey." The transmission ended. Zexthul stared at the blank screen, his mind reeling. An 8-year-old human child had just delivered a more effective psychological attack than most hegemony military strategists could manage. And she had done it with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing the weather. "Admiral," his communications officer said softly, "I think we need to seriously consider withdrawal." For the first time in his career, Zexthul found himself agreeing with that assessment. But as he was about to give the order, new contacts appeared on the edge of the system. Human reinforcements were arriving. The reinforcements that emerged from the outer system defied everything Zexthul thought he knew about human technology. These weren't the crude vessels he had been fighting for hours. These ships moved with predatory grace, their hulls flowing and shifting like living creatures. "What are those?" Morden whispered, staring at the sensor readings that made no sense. The answer came from an unexpected source. His own science officer, who had been quietly analyzing human technology throughout the battle, stepped forward with trembling limbs. "Admiral, I believe the humans have been learning from us. During the engagement, they've been scanning our ships, downloading our technology, and somehow integrating it into their own systems in real time. That's impossible. It takes years to understand and implement alien technology. Not for these creatures, sir. Look at the data streams." The display showed something that chilled Zexthul to his core. Human ships were actively rewriting their own software. redesigning their own hull configurations, and adapting their weapon systems, all while engaged in combat. They were evolving their technology at a pace that should have been biologically impossible. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, panic clear in his voice. "The new human vessels are using our own shield frequencies against us. They're adapting hegemony weapon systems to target our vulnerabilities." Admiral Chen's voice crackled across the communication channels again, but now it carried an edge of cold satisfaction. "Surprised, Admiral? You shouldn't be. This is what humans do. We adapt, we overcome, we evolve. You brought us the greatest gift in our species' history." "What gift?" Zexthul demanded. "A challenge worthy of our attention." The new human fleet moved into formation with their battered compatriots. But these fresh vessels were clearly superior to anything the hegemony had faced before. They had taken hegemony technology and somehow improved upon it, creating hybrid systems that combined human ingenuity with alien engineering. "Admiral," his xenobiologist spoke up from her station, "I've been studying the human communications intercepts. I believe I understand what we're truly facing." "Explain." "The humans aren't just one species, sir. They're thousands of distinct genetic lines that have been competing with each other for millions of years. They've never achieved true unity because they've never stopped evolving, never stopped adapting to new challenges." The main display shifted to show Earth's surface in detail. Instead of the unified planet hegemony intelligence had suggested, Zexthul saw thousands of different political entities, each with its own military, its own technology, its own approach to warfare. "They're not fighting us as one species," the xenobiologist continued. "They're fighting us as thousands of different warrior cultures, each trying to prove they can kill us better than their neighbors. We're not facing Earth's military. We're facing every military Earth has ever produced." As if to prove her point, new weapon signatures began appearing on sensors, weapons that operated on principles the hegemony had never encountered. Some appeared to manipulate time itself, slowing down hegemony projectiles while accelerating human attacks. Others seemed to phase in and out of normal space, striking from impossible angles. "How are they doing this?" Morden demanded. The answer came from intercepts of human communications, broadcast in the clear as if they wanted the hegemony to understand. "Beijing to Moscow. Quantum entanglement torpedoes ready for deployment. Tokyo confirming temporal displacement mines are active. Geneva reporting successful weaponization of dark matter research. CERN to all stations. The particle accelerator has been converted to a reality deletion weapon. Coordinates locked on target." Zexthul felt his world tilt. The humans had weaponized theoretical physics. They had taken experimental research projects and turned them into instruments of war in a matter of hours. "Admiral," his communications officer said urgently, "priority message from High Command. Put it through." The voice of Supreme Marshal Thexnor filled the bridge, carrying the authority of the entire hegemony military structure. "Admiral Zexthul, you are ordered to withdraw immediately. This engagement is terminated. Sir, with respect, we still have numerical superiority. We can still win this." "You can still what?" The Marshal's voice carried disbelief. "Admiral, we've been monitoring this engagement. The humans have just demonstrated technology that our science departments haven't even theorized. They've gone from primitive kinetic weapons to reality-altering devices in the space of 6 hours. They're just more advanced than our intelligence suggested." "No, Admiral. They're not advanced. They're adaptable. There's a difference. An advanced species develops technology slowly, carefully with proper testing and safety protocols. These humans are grabbing whatever they can find and turning it into weapons with no regard for their own safety or the fundamental laws of physics." As if summoned by his words, alerts began screaming across Zexthul's bridge. The human reinforcement fleet had done something impossible. They had synchronized their weapons fire with the planet's magnetic field, creating a resonance cascade that turned the entire solar system into a weapon. "They're using the star itself as ammunition," the science officer reported in a voice barely above a whisper. "They've found a way to redirect solar flare activity and aim it at our fleet." Zexthul watched in horrified fascination as a stream of stellar plasma, guided by human technology, lanced across space toward his remaining ships. The temperature readings alone were enough to vaporize any known material. "All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace," he ordered. "Sir, hyperspace entry requires careful calculation. If we jump without proper navigation, if we don't jump, we're all dead." But as his ships began powering up their hyperspace drives, the humans demonstrated yet another impossible capability. The space around the hegemony fleet began to solidify somehow, as if the humans had found a way to thicken reality itself. Hyperspace entry denied, the navigation officer reported. They're jamming space-time itself. Admiral Chen's voice returned to the communications channel, but now he wasn't alone. Hundreds of human voices joined him, speaking in unison across dozens of languages, creating a chorus that seemed to come from everywhere at once. You came here believing you were hunting animals, the collective human voice said. You forgot that on Earth the most dangerous animals are the ones that hunt the hunters. Images began flooding Zexthal's displays. Not tactical information, but something far more terrifying. Historical records from Earth showing millennia of human warfare. Humans fighting with primitive weapons, then advanced ones, then weapons that bent reality itself to their will. We've been preparing for you for our entire existence, the voices continued. Every war we've fought, every weapon we've built, every strategy we've developed has been practiced for this moment. We didn't know you were coming, but we've been getting ready anyway. The images showed human children learning mathematics through ballistics problems, human artists creating beauty from weapons of mass destruction, human scientists working on projects that could end their own species, simply to see if it could be done. Do you understand now? The human voices asked. We're not just another species for your collection. We're what happens when evolution decides to weaponize curiosity. We're what happens when a species refuses to accept that anything is impossible. Zexthal's remaining ships began to die, not from weapons fire, but from something far worse. The humans had found a way to convince matter itself to stop existing. Ships simply faded away as if reality had forgotten they were ever there. Admiral, Mordan said quietly. What do we do? Zexthal looked at his tactical display. Of his 300 ships, fewer than 50 remained functional. The humans had losses too, but they were replacing their destroyed vessels faster than they were losing them, somehow manufacturing new ships from raw materials in real time. We surrender, he said finally. Sir, open a channel to the human fleet. All frequencies. Emergency surrender protocols. Admiral, his communications officer said hesitantly. Our protocols don't cover surrendering to a species we came here to exterminate. Then we'll write new protocols. The channel opened, and Zexthal found himself speaking to a species that had just redefined what warfare could be. Admiral Chen, this is Admiral Zexthal. The hegemony fleet formally requests terms of surrender. The response came not from Chen, but from thousands of human voices speaking as one. Surrender denied. The two words hung in space like a death sentence. Surrender denied. Zexthal felt something break inside his mind as he processed what he had just heard. I don't understand, he said into the communication channel. We're offering to withdraw. We'll leave your system and never return. The response came from a single human voice this time, female young, speaking with the casual tone of someone discussing a routine task. Admiral, my name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm Admiral Chen's daughter, and I'm a xenopsychologist. My job is to understand how alien minds work. Would you like to know what we've learned about the hegemony? What does that have to do with our surrender? Everything. You see, we've been intercepting your communications since you entered our system. We know about the other 17 worlds you've conquered. We know about the populations you've enslaved or eliminated. We know about your expansion plans. Images began appearing on Zexthal's displays. Not tactical information, but something far more disturbing. Records from hegemony conquered worlds. Billions of beings dead or enslaved. Entire species reduced to extinction or servitude. You don't wage war, Admiral. You commit genocide. There's a difference. War implies that both sides have a chance to win. What you do is extermination. We offer the conquered species the choice to serve the hegemony. Dr. Chen's laugh was cold. Serve or die isn't a choice. It's coercion. And according to our analysis of your psychological profiles, you would have done the same to us. That is irrelevant now. We're offering to surrender. To you, maybe, but not to us. You see, Admiral, humans don't think like other species. When someone threatens our children, our homes, our very existence, we don't just defend ourselves. We eliminate the threat. Permanently. New contacts appeared on Zexthal's sensors. Not ships this time, but something far more terrifying. The readings suggested massive structures materializing in space around his fleet. Structures that defied physics as he understood it. What are those? Morton whispered. Prisons, Dr. Chen replied. somehow hearing the question across the communication channel. We've decided that simply destroying your fleet isn't enough. You came here to commit genocide, so we're going to teach you what it feels like to be on the receiving end. The structures resolved on Zexthal's displays. They were crystalline constructs that seemed to fold space around themselves, creating enclosed pockets of reality. Each one was large enough to hold a hegemony ship, but the readings suggested they were much larger inside than outside. You're going to imprison us? Oh no, Admiral. Prison implies eventual release. These are something different. We've taken the technology you used to commit genocide and improved it. Each of those structures contains a pocket dimension where time moves differently. We're going to put each of your ships in one of them, and you're going to experience what your victims felt. That's impossible. Temporal manipulation on that scale would require the energy output of a star? Yes. Fortunately, we have one handy. Zexthal's sensor readings confirmed his worst fears. The humans had somehow tapped directly into their system's star, channeling stellar energy through devices that shouldn't have been able to exist. They had turned their entire solar system into a machine designed for revenge. This is insane, he breathed. Is it? Let me explain what's going to happen to you, Admiral. Each of your ships will be placed in a temporal prison where you'll experience 100 years of subjective time for every hour that passes in real space. During that time, you'll live through the destruction of everything you've ever cared about. Your families, your worlds, your entire civilization. But we're already cut off from the hegemony, might we know. We've been jamming your communications since the moment you entered our system. As far as the hegemony knows, your fleet simply vanished. They don't know what happened to you. They don't know we exist. They don't know they've just picked a fight with a species that considers creative revenge an art form. Dr. Chen paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a note of something that might have been pity. You see, Admiral, the difference between humans and every other species you've encountered is simple. When other species are threatened with extinction, they fight to survive. When humans are threatened with extinction, we fight to make sure our enemies don't survive either. The temporal prisons began to move, drifting toward Zexthal's remaining ships with inexorable purpose. His weapons officer tried to target them, but the energy beam simply passed through the crystalline structures as if they existed in a different layer of reality. Wait, Zexthal said desperately. We can provide information about the hegemony. Military codes, fleet positions, weaknesses in our defenses. We already have all of that. How? Admiral, in the 6 hours you've been fighting us, we've downloaded and analyzed every bit of data in your ship's computers. We know your fleet positions, your military capabilities, your economic structure, your political systems, and your psychological weaknesses. We know everything there is to know about the hegemony. Zexthal felt his legs give out. He collapsed into his command chair as the full implications of what he was hearing sank in. You're going to invade us. Invade is such a crude word. We prefer visit with extreme prejudice. You see, Admiral, humanity has a very simple philosophy when it comes to threats. We don't just eliminate the immediate danger. We eliminate the source of the danger. Forever. Images began flooding Zexthal's displays again. But these weren't historical records. These were battle plans, detailed invasion strategies for every hegemony world, psychological profiles of every hegemony leader, economic disruption scenarios designed to collapse their entire civilization. This is the difference between us and every species you've conquered, Dr. Chen continued. They fought defensively. They tried to protect what they had. We fight offensively. We hunt down threats and eliminate them at the source. You're talking about committing genocide against the entire hegemony. Are we? Or are we talking about stopping a genocidal empire before it can kill anyone else? The hegemony has exterminated dozens of species. How many more will die if we don't stop you? The temporal prison nearest to his ship began to extend tendrils of crystalline energy toward his hull. Where they touched, reality itself seemed to bend and twist. Please, Zexthal said, and was surprised to hear the desperation in his own voice. My crew? They were just following orders. So were the soldiers who committed genocide on those 17 worlds. Orders don't absolve anyone of responsibility for their actions. What do you want from us? Nothing, Admiral. This isn't about what we want. This is about what we need to do to ensure the safety of our species, and every other species in this galaxy. The hegemony represents an existential threat to all sentient life, so we're going to remove that threat. The crystalline tendrils reached Zexthal's ship, and reality began to fold around them. He could feel time itself beginning to stretch and distort. "You'll never find the hegemony homeworlds," he said desperately. "Our space is too vast, our defense is too strong." Dr. Chen's voice followed him as his ship was drawn into the temporal prison. "Admiral, we've been exploring space for less than a century, and we've already mastered technologies your species took millennia to develop. How long do you think it will take us to find you?" As the pocket dimension closed around his ship, Zexthul heard her final words. "Don't worry about the timeline, though. By the time you experience your first subjective year in there, we'll have already finished our conversation with the Hegemony High Command." The last thing he saw before reality folded completely was Earth, blue and beautiful and utterly terrifying, shrinking away as he was pulled into a prison made of time itself. Behind him, the human fleet was already preparing for their next engagement, but this time they wouldn't be the ones under attack. This time they would be the ones bringing nightmares to an unsuspecting enemy. 3 days after the last hegemony ship disappeared into temporal imprisonment, Earth's orbital shipyards hummed with activity that would have been impossible for any other species. What had taken the hegemony centuries to build, humans were manufacturing in hours. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of the newly constructed flagship Retribution, watching construction data flow across holographic displays. The ship was unlike anything that had existed before the battle. It combined human engineering with hegemony technology, but the result was something that transcended both. "Status report," he said to his assembled staff. "All systems operational," reported Captain Martinez, recently promoted after her spectacular suicide run that had somehow ended with her being rescued by an experimental human teleportation system. "The new fleet is ready for deployment." Fleet composition: 200 primary assault vessels, each incorporating technology reverse-engineered from the hegemony ships. 500 support craft with adaptive manufacturing capabilities. 1,000 reconnaissance drones equipped with quantum entanglement communication arrays. Chen nodded. 3 days ago, humanity had possessed fewer than 300 functional warships. Now they commanded a fleet that could challenge any force in known space. "What about the special projects?" Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her expression grim. "The temporal interrogation of captured hegemony personnel is proceeding ahead of schedule. We've extracted complete intelligence on 17 conquered worlds, 43 hegemony military bases, and the location of their primary command structure. Resistance? Minimal. It turns out that when you experience 1,000 years of subjective time in 3 days, psychological defenses tend to break down rather quickly." Chen felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but pushed it aside. The hegemony had shown no mercy to their victims. Humanity would show no mercy to their oppressors. "What did we learn about the other species they've conquered?" "Disturbing information," Dr. Chen continued. "The hegemony doesn't just conquer worlds. They systematically break the spirit of entire species. They leave just enough survivors to serve as examples, then use them as slave labor to fuel their expansion." Images appeared on the main display. Worlds stripped bare of resources. Populations reduced to tiny fractions of their original size. Species that had once built starships reduced to manual laborers working in hegemony mines. How many survivors total? Across all conquered worlds? Approximately 4 billion sentient beings in various states of enslavement. The number hung in the air like an accusation. 4 billion beings, reduced to slavery because the galaxy had lacked the will or ability to stop the hegemony's expansion. And the hegemony's current military strength? Based on the intelligence we've extracted, they maintain approximately 1,200 capital ships across 47 systems. Their technology is superior to what we faced here, but not significantly. More concerning is their psychological warfare capabilities. Explain. They don't just conquer worlds through military force. They break species psychologically first. They make resistance seem hopeless. Make surrender appear to be the only logical choice. It's how they've maintained control for so long. Chen studied the tactical displays, processing the implications. The hegemony wasn't just a military threat. They were a psychological one. They had convinced an entire galaxy that resistance was futile. What about the other independent species? Potential allies? "That's where it gets interesting," Dr. Chen said, manipulating the holographic display to show galactic political boundaries. There are approximately 2,000 independent species in this galactic sector. Most of them know about the hegemony, but have avoided contact, hoping to stay off their radar. Fear. Pragmatic terror. Every species that has directly confronted the hegemony has been conquered or destroyed. The independents have survived by hiding, by staying quiet, by hoping they're not worth the hegemony's attention. Chen considered this. A galaxy full of species too frightened to fight back, watching as their neighbors were conquered one by one. It was a familiar pattern from Earth's own history. What would happen if someone proved the hegemony could be defeated? Unknown. No one has ever successfully resisted them before. Until now. Until now. Captain Martinez stepped forward. Admiral, we have a communication from Earth Defense Command. Priority 1. Put it through. The voice of General Harrison filled the command center. Admiral, we've completed the evacuation of all essential personnel from Earth. The planet is now fully militarized and ready for your departure. Casualties from the hegemony attack? Surprisingly minimal. Total losses are under 50,000 military personnel. Civilian casualties were almost zero thanks to the early warning systems we've had in place for decades. Chen felt a moment of pride. 50,000 losses against a fleet designed to commit genocide was almost miraculous. What about the temporal prisons? All hegemony personnel are secured. The prisons are self-maintaining and will continue to function for approximately 10,000 years of real time. The prisoners will experience roughly 10 million years subjectively. That's excessive. Sir, with respect, they came here to exterminate our entire species. 10 million years of imprisonment seems like a reasonable response. Chen couldn't argue with that logic. The hegemony had planned to kill 8 billion humans. A punishment that felt like 10 million years of captivity was mathematically mild by comparison. What about our expansion plans? All construction facilities are operating at maximum capacity. We're producing new ships faster than any species in recorded history. Current projections suggest we'll have a fleet of 10,000 vessels within 6 months. And the new technologies? Integration is proceeding smoothly. We've successfully weaponized 17 different hegemony technologies and improved upon most of them. The research teams are particularly excited about the reality manipulation systems. Chen wasn't sure he wanted to know what his scientists meant by excited. Human enthusiasm for weapons development had always been somewhat terrifying, even to other humans. Admiral, Dr. Chen interrupted, there's something else you need to know about the other species. What about them? We've been monitoring their communications since the battle. Word is spreading. Every independent species in this sector now knows that the hegemony fleet was destroyed. And they're asking questions about us, about whether we're planning to replace the hegemony as the dominant power in this region. Chen felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Humanity had just announced its presence on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. They had utterly defeated a force that had seemed unstoppable. Now everyone wanted to know what humanity planned to do with that power. What do the intelligence reports suggest? Fear, mostly. Several species are already preparing defensive measures in case we decide to expand. They're treating us as a potential threat rather than potential allies. Can you blame them? We just demonstrated that we can appear from nowhere and destroy the most powerful military force in known space. No, I can't blame them. But it complicates our strategic situation. If the other species see us as another hegemonic threat, they might ally with the remnants of the actual hegemony against us. Chen studied the galactic map, seeing the problem clearly. Humanity had the power to defeat the hegemony, but they needed allies to hold the peace afterward. Unfortunately, their demonstration of that power had made potential allies wary of their intentions. Recommendations? We need to make contact with the other species. Show them that we're not interested in conquest, just in stopping the hegemony's expansion. And if they don't believe us, then we'll have to prove it through our actions. Chen nodded slowly. Very well. Begin preparations for contact with the nearest independent species. Make it clear that we're seeking allies, not subjects. And, if they refuse, Chen looked at the holographic display showing the vast expanse of hegemony-controlled space. Somewhere out there, billions of sentient beings waited in slavery, hoping for rescue that had never come. Then we rescue the hegemony's victims ourselves, with or without help. As his staff began implementing his orders, Chen wondered if humanity had just saved the galaxy or doomed it to another war. Time would tell which choice they had made. 3 days after the last hegemony ship disappeared into temporal imprisonment, Earth's orbital shipyards hummed with activity that would have been impossible for any other species. What had taken the hegemony centuries to build, humans were manufacturing in hours. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of the newly constructed flagship Retribution, watching construction data flow across holographic displays. The ship was unlike anything that had existed before the battle. It combined human engineering with hegemony technology, but the result was something that transcended both. "Status report," he said to his assembled staff. "All systems operational," reported Captain Martinez, recently promoted after her spectacular suicide run that had somehow ended with her being rescued by an experimental human teleportation system. "The new fleet is ready for deployment. Fleet composition: 200 primary assault vessels, each incorporating technology reverse-engineered from the hegemony ships. 500 support craft with adaptive manufacturing capabilities, 1,000 reconnaissance drones equipped with quantum entanglement communication arrays." Chen nodded. 3 days ago, humanity had possessed fewer than 300 functional warships. Now they commanded a fleet that could challenge any force in known space. "What about the special projects?" Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her expression grim. "The temporal interrogation of captured hegemony personnel is proceeding ahead of schedule. We've extracted complete intelligence on 17 conquered worlds, 43 hegemony military bases, and the location of their primary command structure. Resistance? Minimal. It turns out that when you experience 1,000 years of subjective time in 3 days, psychological defenses tend to break down rather quickly." Chen felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but pushed it aside. The hegemony had shown no mercy to their victims. Humanity would show no mercy to their oppressors. What did we learn about the other species they've conquered? "Disturbing information," Dr. Chen continued. "The hegemony doesn't just conquer worlds. They systematically break the spirit of entire species. They leave just enough survivors to serve as examples, then use them as slave labor to fuel their expansion." Images appeared on the main display. Worlds stripped bare of resources. Populations reduced to tiny fractions of their original size. Species that had once built starships reduced to manual laborers working in hegemony mines. How many survivors total? Across all conquered worlds? Approximately 4 billion sentient beings in various states of enslavement. The number hung in the air like an accusation. 4 billion beings reduced to slavery because the galaxy had lacked the will or ability to stop the hegemony's expansion. And the hegemony's current military strength? Based on the intelligence we've extracted, they maintain approximately 1,200 capital ships across 47 systems. Their technology is superior to what we faced here, but not significantly. More concerning is their psychological warfare capabilities. Explain. They don't just conquer worlds through military force. They break species psychologically first. They make resistance seem hopeless, make surrender appear to be the only logical choice. It's how they've maintained control for so long. Chen studied the tactical displays, processing the implications. The hegemony wasn't just a military threat. They were a psychological one. They had convinced an entire galaxy that resistance was futile. What about the other independent species? Potential allies? That's where it gets interesting, Dr. Chen said, manipulating the holographic display to show galactic political boundaries. There are approximately 2,000 independent species in this galactic sector. Most of them know about the hegemony but have avoided contact, hoping to stay off their radar. Fear, pragmatic terror. Every species that has directly confronted the hegemony has been conquered or destroyed. The independents have survived by hiding, by staying quiet, by hoping they're not worth the hegemony's attention. Chen considered this. A galaxy full of species too frightened to fight back, watching as their neighbors were conquered one by one. It was a familiar pattern from Earth's own history. What would happen if someone proved the hegemony could be defeated? Unknown. No one has ever successfully resisted them before. Until now. Captain Martinez stepped forward. Admiral, we have a communication from Earth Defense Command. Priority 1. Put it through. The voice of General Harrison filled the command center. Admiral, we've completed the evacuation of all essential personnel from Earth. The planet is now fully militarized and ready for your departure. Casualties from the hegemony attack? Surprisingly minimal. Total losses are under 50,000 military personnel. Civilian casualties were almost zero thanks to the early warning systems we've had in place for decades. Chen felt a moment of pride. 50,000 losses against a fleet designed to commit genocide was almost miraculous. What about the temporal prisons? All hegemony personnel are secured. The prisons are self-maintaining and will continue to function for approximately 10,000 years of real time. The prisoners will experience roughly 10 million years subjectively. That's excessive. Sir, with respect, they came here to exterminate our entire species. 10 million years of imprisonment seems like a reasonable response. Chen couldn't argue with that logic. The hegemony had planned to kill 8 billion humans. A punishment that felt like 10 million years of captivity was mathematically mild by comparison. What about our expansion plans? All construction facilities are operating at maximum capacity. We're producing new ships faster than any species in recorded history. Current projections suggest we'll have a fleet of 10,000 vessels within 6 months. And the new technologies. Integration is proceeding smoothly. We've successfully weaponized 17 different hegemony technologies and improved upon most of them. The research teams are particularly excited about the reality manipulation systems. Chen wasn't sure he wanted to know what his scientists meant by excited. Human enthusiasm for weapons development had always been somewhat terrifying, even to other humans. Admiral, Dr. Chen interrupted, there's something else you need to know. About the other species, what about them? We've been monitoring their communications since the battle. Word is spreading. Every independent species in this sector now knows that the hegemony fleet was destroyed. And they're asking questions about us. About whether we're planning to replace the hegemony as the dominant power in this region. Chen felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Humanity had just announced its presence on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. They had utterly defeated a force that had seemed unstoppable. Now everyone wanted to know what humanity planned to do with that power. What do the intelligence reports suggest? Fear, mostly. Several species are already preparing defensive measures in case we decide to expand. They're treating us as a potential threat rather than potential allies. Can you blame them? We just demonstrated that we can appear from nowhere and destroy the most powerful military force in known space. No, I can't blame them, but it complicates our strategic situation. If the other species see us as another hegemonic threat, they might ally with the remnants of the actual hegemony against us. Chen studied the galactic map, seeing the problem clearly. Humanity had the power to defeat the hegemony, but they needed allies to hold the peace afterward. Unfortunately, their demonstration of that power had made potential allies wary of their intentions. Recommendations? We need to make contact with the other species. Show them that we're not interested in conquest, just in stopping the hegemony's expansion. And if they don't believe us, then we'll have to prove it. Through our actions, Chen nodded slowly. Very well. Begin preparations for contact with the nearest independent species. Make it clear that we're seeking allies, not subjects. And if they refuse? Chen looked at the holographic display showing the vast expanse of hegemony-controlled space. Somewhere out there, billions of sentient beings waited in slavery, hoping for rescue that had never come. Then we rescue the hegemony's victims ourselves, with or without help. As his staff began implementing his orders, Chen wondered if humanity had just saved the galaxy or doomed it to another war. Time would tell which choice they had made.